What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and to another Overwatch League discussion video. Today we'll be revisiting a topic I made close to a year ago now, actually. My original one thing I'd change for each team video was a hit, and I had a lot of fun making that. Link to that can be found in the description if you want to check it out, by the way. Since many of my opinions have changed since then, though, I figured now was as good a time as ever to revisit this subject. Let's try and stick to tradition from that previous video by using a similar format. So let's do this in alphabetical order, which means that first up is the Atlanta Reign. Atlanta looks to be a relatively strong team this year. From an overall standpoint, I like the Reign quite a bit. They have a well-balanced and diverse roster with some awesome branding to go along with it. I had to dig deep to come up with an answer for this one. Eventually, I settled on one thing though. I think the Reign have too many hit scam players. I don't know if it's necessary to have Sharp, Edison, and Babybay all at once. If I was the one in charge of the Reign, I would consider looking for a potential trade partner. Edison and Sharp have high potential, so maybe you trade Babybay to a team who needs veteran leadership. It's something that you don't really need to do, but it's still worth considering. And maybe you could throw in one of your backup tanks to get some extra money, which you can pay your star players with in the future. The Reign are in a very nice place right now, so there's nothing major I'd really want to change with them. Anyway, next up is the Boston Uprising. Like with last year, I probably could just say that I'd like to change their color still, but I've thought of something a lot better since then. The one thing I'd want to change about Boston is their management. Let's call it how it is. Huck ain't the answer, Chief. In these 3 years that he's been in charge, there's been so many stories about him and Boston just being this terrible org. I don't care if he's supposedly a good scouter or not. He's been called a liar so many times. Not only that, but he refuses to spend big money on big name players a lot of the time. To top it all off, he always feels this need to intervene when it's not necessary. According to the interview Avast did with Blase, Huck literally traded guys like Guangzhou and No out of nowhere, and it would seem that Guangzhou never even wanted to trade in the first place. Could it be a coincidence that Huck got rid of the biggest leadership figures Boston has ever had? Perhaps, but his track record would tell you otherwise. It's painfully obvious that Huck is a shady dude. Just get rid of him, Boston. Do your fans a favor. They've already suffered enough. Now let's talk Chengdu Hunters. These boys made many of the roster changes I was hoping they'd make during the offseason. The DPS line is more consistent thanks to Leave, they've got a backup main tank, and they have more firepower at support. When you combine that with how lovable this team is, it's difficult to pinpoint something you just can't stand about them. I guess for me personally, I would change how often the Hunters try to play these wacky comps involving Wrecking Ball and other weird things as well. There's nothing wrong with throwing out those comps sometimes, as they've found plenty of success in the past with them, but there's been failures along the way as well. All you have to do is look at their Season 2 record. That's how inconsistent they were trying to run these wacky off-meta things. The Hunters honestly should just play more of the on-meta stuff in the future. They've proven they can play the normal stuff just fine. Like anybody else, remember that game in Season 2 against Vancouver? They literally were matching them on goats. They took them to map 5. Instead of gambling on if their opponents can adapt, why not just beat them into the ground with what they already know? This is probably just wishful thinking since it's Chengdu, but a man can dream. The Dallas Fuel. It's time to let go of the past. Say goodbye to what you thought could work back in the day. Ditch your coaching staff and some of your old players. You don't need Zach, AKM, Unko, Trill, or Harry Hook. Say your goodbyes and find some suitable replacements. Consider transitioning to an all-Korean lineup while you're at it. You're pretty much already there when you think about it. All you have to do is get rid of some bench warmers plus Note and Crimzo. Just do it. Surround Guangzhou, Dohan, Decay with better players and coaching, and maybe Dallas could become legit. Up next on the list is the Florida Mayhem. In last year's video, I really wanted Florida to change their colors, so mission accomplished there, I guess. As for 2020, the major thing I want out of the Mayhem is to reevaluate their main support position. I for one think Chris is average at best, so picking up a free agent or something could be of great use. I understand that Chris is a crucial piece for the comms, but I'm sure there's another main support out there who can offer the same thing while also being a noticeable upgrade from the skill perspective. You know, Florida, there's a certain guy out there in free agency. You may have heard of him. His name's Coma. He played on Shanghai last year. He was pretty decent, you know. It might be worth it to give him a tryout. I don't really care who it is in the end, but please just get a new main support. It would help cover up a noticeable weakness on a team that's pretty decent looking otherwise. The Guangzhou Charge. Again, this is a harder one. Good branding with a deep roster, but there is one part of the team that stands out. Take a moment to look at their tank line. They only have 2 players there. Don't get me wrong, Rio and Krong are fine. They make for a solid tank line that shows good consistency, but having nobody whatsoever to back them up could lead to some issues later on if somebody were to get sick, injured, or exhausted. Picking up some guys who you could get for relatively cheap would help complete this roster, and they would be even stronger as a result. The Hangzhou Spark. Like with the Charge, they're pretty much set everywhere except for tank, but for the Spark, it's exclusively main tank. Gushue is a godly player, but if something were to ever happen to the guy, it would be a GG. The guy they get to back him up doesn't even need to be amazing. So long as he can synergize with the team and not feed, then it doesn't really matter too much who it is. My philosophy is that it's always good to have backup plans in case things start to go bad. Life is full of curveballs, and sometimes the unexpected happens. Having a contingency plan in place can help you stay prepared for the worst. Up next is the Houston Outlaws. What I'm about to say for them is wishful thinking, as I'm pretty sure they used up all of their budget already, but I really want Houston to get another main tank. It be that time, ladies and gentlemen. Move on from Muma. He's not as good as he used to be, and that's a fact. It's not entirely his fault, but he's made a lot of mistakes recently. I know there isn't a crazy amount of main tanks out there, but I'm pretty sure they could find a replacement for Muma if they did enough searching. And with them getting more Korean players during the offseason, they don't necessarily have to limit themselves to just the Western talent pool. Perhaps you could try and recruit somebody from contenders, or maybe you go after Bumper. I know it sounds insane because it's probably not likely, but you do already have 3 people he's worked with before, so maybe he'll be tempted to join. If Houston just got somebody who's a little bit better at the main tank position who could do a bit more for them, then I honestly think they could win more games without just having to rely on Winston being viable. Team number 9 is the London Spitfire. It's not easy to alter something when the team you're looking at is so new and full of young prospects, as there's always the chance they could develop into something special one day, so for London, I'm going to take the cautious approach. The one thing I change about the Spitfire is to pick a consistent starter at the flex support position. In their recent games, they've been favoring Krillin, but they've gone back and forth between him and Hiley multiple times so far. I understand that the coaching staff is just trying to find what works best for the team right now, but I for one think a team synergy can take a hit when you constantly change around the supports. I've never been a fan of this philosophy ever since Season 1. I would understand if London had these two specialize in certain maps, but that's not really the case. It almost feels random. Using Krillin or Hiley as the starter for a while could establish consistency that may be the driving force in helping this London team move up to the next level. And now we have officially reached the halfway mark. Up next is the Los Angeles Gladiators. Not gonna lie, when I did my evaluation while prepping this video, I came to the realization that they're nearly perfect. Their coaching staff is one of the best in the league, they have good starters with backups at every position except flex support, and in general, they're a likable group of guys. Because it would just be really boring to say they need a backup like with the other teams I've mentioned, let's throw in a bonus one. One other thing I'd change about the Gladiators is to permanently delete their theme song out of existence. Call me a hater or the guy that likes to have no fun, but their song is just dumb. Half of it is just them saying the name of their team over and over again. It's repetitive and stupid. Come on, Glads, you can do better than that for a walkout song. There's so much music out there in today's world, so please, for the love of God, find a new theme. The Los Angeles Valiant. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet here. I don't like their new color still. The blue doesn't even look that bad, but it feels so uncreative. The green made them stand out so much more. Plus, their color scheme looks like Boston 2.0, and nobody should have to be compared to Boston. Am I the only one who thinks they should have changed to like the Immortals colors, let's say? The black and the dark green would have looked really clean. Why be like so many other teams? I just don't get it. Now for the NYXL. What the hell do you even change about a team that has been consistently good for 3 years? And unlike previous years, this year they have new firepower available off the bench. The thing I'm going to pick for the NYXL though has to do with their style. I'd like to see them continue to move away from the slow reactionary playstyle and move more towards being the aggressors. In the past, really good teams have exposed New York for being patient by hard focusing mono, and a lot of the time, the supports would panic and overcommit in fear of losing mono in a fight. In all honesty, it's understandable why they do that. For one, I feel like it's common sense as a support player to try and keep your main tank alive, but also, mono's the center of stability. The NYXL have relied on him a lot. But if they can flip the script, then it might not be a problem. They won't get exposed so much. Instead of waiting around for the enemy to come at you or to make a mistake, why not try to be the ones who play fast for once? They already have aggressive pieces, plus a new head coach with a different philosophy, so why not give it a shot? It goes against everything you've built these last few years, but maybe mixing up your style depending on the opponent could get you over the hump. The Paris Eternal. You know, last week I never would have been able to come up with anything for these guys, but after Hip suddenly announced his retirement, the answer became clear. Paris needs some more help at flex support. Even if this new recruit doesn't end up playing over Gray, just the thought of having a second option in case Gray starts to show lackluster play would be really nice. With how much of a leader Hip was, maybe Paris could search for another flex support with the same qualities. Or maybe they could just go for someone who has a high skill ceiling. Either way, making a move could be quite beneficial here. Maybe they could try and trade for Boombox or something somebody, you know? If Paris did anything at all, I'd be really happy with them. The Philadelphia Fusion. Yet again, I find myself getting stuck. Philly have looked so good so far this year. They've lost one game the whole season, and it came down to a final fight in a map 5 scenario. And unlike last year, Sato was actually playing well. But since there's always the chance he could relapse, I suppose, maybe the Fusion could sign another main tank? It's really not necessary, but better to be safe than sorry, am I right? I like where the Fusion are at right now, so I kind of had to be picky with them. Now for the defending champs, the San Francisco Shock. I've given this team infinite praise throughout the last year or so, and deservingly so, I'd like to add. So many superstar level players, and they're under the control of a coaching whiz like Krusty. I love the current state of this team. With that said though, we've got to think about the future with these guys. The Shock have a lot of star players, all of which deserve to get paid well. With how large their roster is, it might not be possible to give every player a contract extension that they'll agree to. To that extent, the Shock may want to consider making a trade. It would suck to lose one of their pieces, yes, but it's a sacrifice you might have to make if you want to maintain a majority of your core roster. Somebody like Sinatra, he probably just got a massive payday for winning MVP, let's be honest. And how about Choi and Super? They need extensions too. And these are high-skill players we're talking about. They want to get paid. And if Shock management wants to afford these expenses, it might be necessary to trade somebody away. Maybe you consider trading somebody like Striker or Rascal, as you have players who can cover what they usually play anyway. Or perhaps a DPS player in the future is going to request a trade because they're unhappy with the amount of playtime they're getting, so you just trade them. I'm sure somebody would be willing to pay any of these DPS players a pretty penny. So if money does end up becoming a problem, maybe the Shock could think about taking this approach. Next up on the list is the Seoul Dynasty. It's still early on in the season for them, so I can't really say for certain if something needs to be changed or if everything's fine, so I'm going to play it safe and say that Seoul should maybe consider getting a new main support player on the roster. Toby isn't bad, but I've never been a fan of the guy when he's not on Lucio. And with hero pools making the meta change on a weekly basis, flexibility at every position is key. If Lucio were to be banned, then you could just switch over to the other guy you have. It could just be me, but I think this would optimize Seoul's ability to play up to their maximum potential. Next up is the Shanghai Dragons. There's only one thing I'd want Shanghai to do right now. Please continue to run a consistent lineup. I know it was really only that one time against Chengdu, but they randomly decided to change up the rotation when we had already seen Lip and Fleta work so well the day before. Please, Coach Moon. Don't mess up like you did with the Valiant. The Dragons are potential title contenders, and if you want them to keep up with strong opponents, then you have to play what you know is going to work. Anyway, moving on to our next team, we've got the Toronto Defiant. A team with my favorite color scheme and some of my favorite players. That just makes it really hard to make major changes of any kind. But speaking about it logically, they definitely benefit from adding a few new players to the roster. Getting somebody who could play a better Orisa and or Rhyme than Beast would be nice. And another flex DPS wouldn't hurt either. Agility's maybe my favorite player in the league, but he's nowhere near perfect. He's a very hit or miss player, so somebody with better consistency could go a long way. As for the other Canadian team, aka the Vancouver Titans, I'm going to voice the same opinion that I've had with them since the beginning of the season. Please get another main tank, Vancouver. Fissure may be doing fine right now, but you never know when things could suddenly take a turn for the worst. Fissure's a ridiculously good player, and I think he very well is capable of maintaining a good mindset, but given the history, I wouldn't risk it. You only have an 8-man roster, so there's no way it's not within your budget. I'd feel so much better if they just had some sort of plan ready in case things go wrong. And finally, to wrap it all up, we have the Washington Justice. My wishes for the Justice are simple. Please, for the sake of Corey's sanity, get this guy some help. The Justice continue to plummet downward in the standings, and I can't help but feel like it's because the Justice don't have enough firepower. Most of their players are pretty inconsistent. It's sad because this Justice roster is very likable from a personality standpoint. They have a lot of good guys, but being a good person is not enough. They've got to get better players in the game. It's time to sign a high-impact player. Get a new flex DPS, or maybe a new support. This certainly isn't going to solve all of your problems, but I think it would make for a good start. Washington is working with so little right now. They technically don't even have an 8-man roster since Lulcich is still stuck in visa hell. The Justice need to do something. As of this recording, they are 18th place in the standings. A 2-6 record is not pretty. They just can't wait around for a meta that Corey's guaranteed to dominate in. They need more playmakers, and they need them now. Welp, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts for the final team, so there you go. That's one thing I'd change about every Overwatch League team. What would you change about every team? Let me know down in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more content, then be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to go the extra mile, consider following me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch, joining the Discord server through the link in the description, or purchasing a channel membership. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, This is ATP, signing out. Peace.